Hello and welcome. I appreciate you being here with me for part 6 in our year-long series on personal effectiveness. If you are new to this channel, please know that we've been around for 5 or 6 years and we've been loading up content at least once a month. So there's a library of topics that you can go and choose from. If you're in management or HR, you'll probably find some nice little tidbits here. I'm Deb, and I also want to point out for those who are new even to Bright Talk that right underneath the video, you'll see a tab for attachments. It has some links, it has some bonus content. The very first one you'll see there is a copy of the slides that I'll be covering with you today. I know some of you like to take those, print them, take your notes on them, or have an opportunity to reference them as we go. So help yourself to those slides that are loaded up. If you have any technical difficulties, look for the little orange button. That little orange button is the help desk at Bright Talk, and they're really responsive. They'll chat right away with you and help you to get any issues worked out that are technology-based because, well, I'm not so good at that. And I'll be busy presenting, so I won't be able to help you anyway. So let them know. But if you do have questions for me, by all means, please post those. Just click on the question mark, post your question for me. I like to take those questions as they come. And if for some reason there's any question that I can't get to during the presentation, I will get in touch with you. I'll make sure that you get an answer to your question. So with that said, let's roll. Today we're talking about problem solving. Just at a very basic level, we're going to talk about some fundamentals that will make you more effective as a problem solver. I'll also give you 10 unique approaches to solving problems, approaches that will help you to break out of those times when it just seems unsolvable. You know, like when you're in the 15th meeting and everybody's talking about the same thing again. That's called admiring the problem. And you don't want to do that. You want to solve it. So we'll talk about how to break through some of those tough challenges and use some techniques that actually are sort of fun. Now, if you're like most people, you've probably relied on just one or two methods for solving problems. You either talk to people to get ideas and the voice of experience, or you solve a problem using a solution that you've already seen before or used or heard about somewhere else. And there's nothing wrong with those two approaches. It's just that it's only two. So it limits potentially your ability to find the right solution, or it may not be producing any solution at all for you. Now, I'm Deb, and for those of you who know me, you know that I really enjoy connecting with you on LinkedIn. I have credentials and experience, most importantly, because I continue to work with people at the front lines. And I am giving you information that I've recently given to people and helped them to apply. So I know it's all pretty current and solid. Well, it's all about getting started, so we might as well. What we're going to be doing, as I said, is exploring some alternatives, some techniques that you can try when the old ways of solving problems aren't working. Some new techniques you can try when you're stumped or when you want to involve others in solving a problem and involve them in ways that will be both fun and productive. But before we go to those, I want to start out by talking about why we sometimes get frozen, why we can't even seem to get that first step towards solving a problem. And it's a long list. You've probably seen or experienced every single one of these. Sometimes they all happen at the same time. But these are all barriers to solving problems. And everything that I have listed here on screen, all 8 of these items, these are mental barriers. They're attitudes or thoughts, perceptions that get in your way. My favorite one is the first one because it happens inevitably. You go in to try to help solve a problem, and some people are saying that automated response, oh, we've been there, we've done that. And somebody else, same team, same organization, somebody else is saying, oh, we can't do that because it's never been done before. And the funny thing is that every idea you ever come up with, it's going to fall into one category or the other. And my response generally is, so what? So what if you've tried it before? This world is changing so fast, and the situations and circumstances and the opportunities and the tools are developing, evolving all the time. So what if you've tried it before? We're not going to do it exactly the same way. And even if we did, the situation is not exactly the same. And if it's never been done before, that's also a so what? How do you know then that it doesn't work? You see, with solving problems, we have to be able to be willing to let go of the status quo. That's hard because, as you know, even when things aren't perfect, well, they're at least familiar. And sometimes it's that familiarity that we cling to. The other items here, as I said, they are all subjective. They're based in feelings and perceptions. And that doesn't mean, though, that we can dismiss them out of hand. What it means is that we have to dignify the feelings and the beliefs that are behind these barriers. We're not going to be successful in solving a problem if we act as if these barriers don't exist and aren't real. They really are. They're very real for the people who are experiencing these barriers. So you're not going to get very far if, for example, you just deny that the problem exists, or if you ignore the fact that somebody else genuinely feels that way. If somebody is feeling like the problem doesn't exist, well, you've got to acknowledge that they have that feeling. You don't need to have an argument about, yes, it does, no, it doesn't. Instead, you need to understand why they feel that it doesn't exist. What is it that causes them to see this differently than the way you see it? What is it that would help them to see things the way you do, or to at least see things differently from the place where they are completely in denial? You do that by listening, by taking into account their feelings, by stepping into their shoes and experiencing things the way that they do. Yes, it takes more time. Maybe you have authority and you could just make it happen, make the problem solve the way you want it to be solved, make the change that you see as the right one. Maybe you could do that. But is that sustainable? Is that what you really want to do? Do you really want to get into a situation where you have forced a solution when people didn't even see a problem? Probably not. It's just going to cause a lot of backlash and additional barriers. Every single one of these barriers, right? These are emotions and perceptions. You magnify them when you ignore them or when you try to operate in a vacuum as if these experiences and feelings and beliefs didn't exist and weren't important. So that's step one. And you'll find some other content here on the channel about change management and about soft skills that will help you to overcome these barriers in the way that I'm describing now. Well, here's what you need. In order to overcome those barriers, in order to tackle any problem, in order to solve it, these are some things you need to do. And if you're not doing these things, if you don't have these essentials in place, you're probably erecting barriers like the ones I just showed you. The resentment about the problem, the burnout, the willingness to compromise and settle for something short-term or partial just to get it over with. And those emotions that cloud objectivity, right? All of those kinds of barriers can be directly caused if you aren't setting things up with what you need. So the first thing you need, the very first thing you need is a clear understanding of the problem. Some folks are just wired to hear the bare minimum and to jump into solution mode, to solve the first piece of it or the most expedient part of it or the most familiar piece of it rapidly. That's not always the best approach. Maybe what someone's describing to you and they open up with, maybe that's more like a symptom of the deeper level problem. Or maybe they're just telling you that because that's something they've seen or heard before, and it makes sense as a lead, and they're trying to construct for you a bigger picture, though, And if you jump in with too quick a solution, you'll never have a clear understanding of the problem. But once you get there, once you have a clear understanding of the problem, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide, you also need to have a very clear idea of who owns the problem, who's responsible for the problem, who has a vested interest in the problem, who's most motivated to solve this problem. Because if you delegate the solution or the decision making about a solution to someone who's not as interested, doesn't care as much, won't benefit, well, they're not going to take it seriously. And they too are probably going to race toward a solution that doesn't get to the heart of the matter. Well, as you're doing this, as you're understanding the problem, as you're understanding the parties involved and who's going to own this, you will be developing an understanding of the impact as well. How big is this problem? How bad are the impacts of this problem? What's the long tail? Ultimately, does it do more than serve as a nuisance or an inefficiency or an embarrassment to the person who's talking about it? Does it have a long tail that affects other departments, that impacts perhaps even the customers and ultimately the sales, the revenue, the profit in your organization? We don't want to be catastrophic here and exaggerating, but we do want to be diligent enough to figure out what the implications of the problem, if unaddressed, will actually be. And you can often get there by thinking about the opposite side, not just what's potentially happening because of this problem, but also what are the possibilities if we solve this problem. Keep it proportionate. If you're thinking about problems and their long tail, think about possibilities and their long tail in equal measure. That's for your objectivity and your credibility and your opportunity to really fully understand the problem. Now let's come back to the first circle here. We've got to have a clear understanding of the problem first and foremost. And I'm not talking about symptoms. I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about what's at the very root of all of that. What's the root cause of this problem? If you don't get to root cause, what you'll end up with is symptoms that you're solving. You can treat someone's cough by giving them a medication that will temporarily soothe the cough, make them cough less often or less violently. But if they have a deeper level, bigger issue going on and you don't look for that root cause, you're potentially harming that person more than you're helping them. You're potentially doing damage to that individual by not paying attention to what really needs your attention. So we've got to be able to look deeper at the root cause of any problem for the very same reason. We can do more harm than good if we don't get there. So how do you frame up this problem? How do you get to the root cause? Well, you talk about it. You say the problem is, and you get people's response to that. Or you say the problem is, do I have that right? What's behind this problem? What more is it? What am I missing? And people will tell you that this is generally not a mystery, at least not to the people who are encountering the problem and dealing with the problem and doing their best to work around the problem every day. So get that input and frame up the problem so that you get all the way to its root cause. Now, here's a few more ideas about setting up the frame. In addition to getting to the root cause, you can also name it. You can identify it. Out of these 5 types of problems, which one is it? See, some of these are easier, much easier than others to solve. And if you treat a problem as one of the easy ones, but you don't get to root cause and you don't do the deeper level work, if all you do is you stay at the surface, people will become frustrated and they will question your leadership and your interest in helping them. And they will eventually start to think of you as ineffective. So we're doing a lot of setup here before we get to the 10 ways you can get creative in problem solving, because this is dire and it's important, and you don't want to use the 10 creative ways to solve a problem before you know what is that problem, what's the nature of that problem, and everything that we've talked about already. So the 5 types. The 5 types of problems. First up is a factual problem. These are the easiest ones to solve because they're facts. That means they do have a right answer. With a little research to identify with objectivity, with your confirmation bias out of the way, so that's good critical thinking that you have to employ. But to get to real facts and strip away opinions, you can get the answer. And if it's merely a factual problem, is it A or B? Well, the facts are going to define that for you and give you clarity on which one is the right choice. So that's the easiest. I'm going to skip over to the hardest, which is at the end. These are your people problems. And if you are in frontline management, you're probably dealing with a lot more people problems than you care to admit. That's not about you. This is just the nature of being a manager. So you're facing potentially a lot of these kinds of problems, and they're not only the most frequent, but they're the most important to handle in a way that's visible, that make it clear that you care and that you're proactively and quickly responding to problems that directly impact people. Now, people problems, they take all shapes. This can be conflicts between individuals. It could be underperformance of an individual. It could be soft skill gaps like communication issues. Whatever the people problems are, though, even if they're uncomfortable, you don't want to leave them unresolved. You don't want to seem disinterested just because you're uncomfortable. You have to enter in a way that's showing your clear intent to help people, to show them a clear path to their own success, to help them get on board with the team, to resolve those interpersonal conflicts, whatever it might be. You have to do it. Managers have no choice. That's why your job exists, is to get through those kinds of problems and to help everyone on the team feel that they can be successful. Like so many things, there are other presentations on this channel that will help you if this is an area where you struggle. Now let's just talk quickly about the middle 3, the types of problems here that we often don't identify. We've got operational problems. Those are the ones that are about your systems, your processes, the things that do require a considerable amount of introspection and of analysis to be able to get to collaboratively, to analyze and to strip back and to look for root causes of. We have tactical problems. These often aren't so complicated, but they can take a lot of time, especially if you choose a shortcut that doesn't really remedy the problem. Then you find yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if it's not you, it's somebody that you've delegated the work to, or they figured out that you're just going to say the same thing, so they might as well do the same thing. And it's inefficient. It causes people to have to deny a problem and use the workaround that never really solves the problem. Why go to all that extra work of getting around the problem when if you could just one time invest the time to solve it once and for all? And although it's mislabeled here, the next kind of problem, the one in blue there, these are about the things that are getting you off course. So that should be labeled strategic problems. It should be described a little differently here. My apologies for having a wrong slide. But strategic problems, these are the ones that really are going to interfere with your ultimate accomplishment of your own goal. Strategic problems need immediate attention, just like people problems. Because something that's going to interfere with your goal, something that's going to give you a delay or a potential detour or absolute roadblock, if it's about your goals, if it's about the outcomes and the mission that you're tasked with delivering on, Well, you can't just blame away the strategic problem. You have to address it. You have to address it head on and as quickly as you're able to identify and recognize it. Now, we could have made an entire presentation out of just what we've covered so far. We're moving pretty quick here. My intention is always to simply introduce you to some information and some tools that you can use to give you some food for thought and some takeaways. So now let's get to the takeaways. No matter what type of problem you're dealing with, if the tried and true isn't getting you to a place where you're feeling effective, then you may want some creative ways to deal with that problem. So I'm going to give you those. Maybe you've heard some of these before. There might be some you've never heard of before. But let's cross-apply what you've learned before, used before, as a strategy for problem solving. So not just for ideation, brainstorming is the first on the list because good old brainstorming is an engaging and a fun way to approach a problem. Actually, though, research tells us that only about 1 in 1,000 business problems is discussed, and even fewer are then addressed with brainstorming. But brainstorming, it's an effective technique, it's a proven technique, it's paid off in all the ways that you can see on screen. Developing a new way to save money, well, 401k plans were developed as a result of brainstorming. And so were disposable diapers. Procter & Gamble found an untapped opportunity as a result of a brainstorming session. And do you remember, back in the 90s when Beanie Babies were all the rage? That product became a marketplace leader, but it was born, the whole idea of Beanie Babies was born in a brainstorming session. So were barcodes and scanners, which we now use prolifically, but they were originally thought about when brainstorming ways to increase the speed of checkout at a grocery store. You can use brainstorming for all kinds of things like cutting down on paperwork or like making things easier. Some outdated technology, microfiche data storage, and fax machines, they too came out of brainstorming sessions. And they were all brainstorming sessions that started with the intention to solve a problem. Now, when you're brainstorming, let's first talk about what it is and what it isn't, then we'll talk about how to do it. But brainstorming, the father of it was a guy named Alex Osborne. He said way back in 1941 that conventional business meetings are inhibiting the creation of new ideas. So he came up with brainstorming. His new technique, he defined it as getting a group to find a solution for a specific problem by amassing all the ideas that are spontaneously given by its members. His premise was that the start of new ideas and solutions already existed. And the only thing needed was a way to nourish those nascent ideas so that they could more fully develop. To do that effectively, Osborne said that you've got to suspend judgment. You've got to be able to not do so quick an initial evaluation that you might discard ideas that could take shape and become something that really is meaningful and valuable. So to do that, you got to give people some permission to go wild, to offer out anything that they might have in their mind. And you have to allow time for it. This is not a typical business meeting where we've got 15 items on an agenda and 30 minutes to talk about all of them. This is time that's dedicated to specifically generating a volume of ideas. To do that, Osborne set some rules. In his initial successes with brainstorming sessions, what he would do is he would spend no more than 10 minutes with no more than 5 people at a time. They'd introduce an idea and every possible, a problem rather, they'd introduce a problem and then they would allow every possible idea to be spoken aloud, no matter how outrageous it might seem, no matter how mundane it would be. There were no edits like we've done that before, we've never done that. It was just a free-for-all, and every single idea was captured. No ideas are rejected during brainstorming. That's what makes it work. That's what liberates people to get all those ideas out there. And it's a separate step, a later step, where you go back and filter. So give it a try. Brainstorming really is fun, and it really is productive when you follow the rules that Osborne originally set out and researched. Remember, these slides are available for you for download in the attachments. So I'm going to go through 10. That was just one. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, so be sure and take the slides so you've got what you need. Now here's a technique that will help you to see your problem in a new way. Let's say that your problem is that you're not getting reports that you need in a timely manner. So think about that for a moment. Now what I'll do is I'll give you a random word, and I want you to think immediately about a sentence about your problem using this random word that I've assigned, but without really thinking about it. Just let it happen. So the problem is you aren't getting reports that you need in a timely manner, and you've got to put that into a sentence, a statement of your problem, using the word toothbrush. And when you think about that, you'll probably come up with something like, it's essential to have the right tools for brushing my teeth, like a toothbrush, just as it's essential to have the right tools for getting reports on time. Or maybe I give you the word for the very same problem. I say, you're not getting your reports on time. That's a problem. The word is balloon. And if you think about that for a moment, don't think too hard though, just blurt out the sentence. Think about whatever comes to mind right away. You only need about 30 seconds, not more. And you might come up with something like, in order for a balloon to be much fun for anyone, it needs air. Well, in order for our reports to get to us on time, we need, and by the way, my sentences are a little longer than yours might be. I did say one sentence. But here's what you're looking for. This is actually working at a subconscious level. What you're looking for are the underlying principles in whatever comes out of the sentence that you offer. The underlying principle, I need a tool. I need to breathe some air into this. It could be fun for someone if it takes a different state. Whatever the underlying principles are, that will reveal something to you and to the group about a problem that you're facing. So I know it sounds a little silly, but it actually works. Just as this one does, this is called the Scamper Technique. That's an acronym. And this is a pretty good one to try if you're ever stuck in a rut. The same processes, the same approaches, they've been used over and over and over again, but you feel that a fresh approach might do you some good. So you try the Scamper Technique and you follow these 7 steps right in order. I'm going to give you an example with, well, we started with a toothbrush. Let's talk about brushing your teeth. So that's the process. How can we improve the process? We might look at Scamper as a way to do that. So we're going to replace a part of the process. We're going to replace running water with a glass of water. That's our first substitution. And now we're going to combine 2 or more parts. We're going to think about, how do we have the cup of water and the toothpaste? How do we combine those? What would that involve? And then how would we adapt to change the characteristics? Does the toothpaste need to be a little thinner, for example? Now, if we modify, we distort this, we're no longer standing at a sink. We are in a different situation where, oh, we've just taken a long flight and there is no available sink, toothpaste, toothbrush, time. So what are we going to do here? We've got to come up with some other uses. We've got to think about how we might do this differently. We might have to eliminate the toothbrush. How might we do that? And suddenly we've got a handy-dandy little product. It's more like a mouthwash, but it actually gets the plaque off your teeth and freshens your breath and gives you the same feeling of actually having brushed. It's got the same effectiveness. What would that be like? And now we're going to look at this from some different angles. So by the way, I'm making these up on the fly. So you see, though, the process, it could be quite a bit more involved with some deeper level discussion. I'm giving you silly examples that we can all relate to, but I hope when you try this, you'll do this with real problems, real work issues that you're facing. Now, here's one that I really like. I use this a lot. I highly value critical thinking, and this is actually a technique of good critical thinking. This is a technique to use when you need to slaughter sacred cows. You've heard that saying, the things that people cling to in an organization and won't even allow discussion about for some reason. There's such a strong, deeply held perception that it seems like you can't even truly discuss the problem. Now, at a time of rapid change in business, which we are all experiencing, it might be essential to challenge established facts, because what was true even yesterday might not be true today, and it's probably not going to be true tomorrow. So we've got to ask questions. We're not going to get people to give up their sacred cow, but we still have to get them thinking about improvement or what could be better. So we just ask questions like, okay, given that you feel very strongly about this fact, let's not talk about that fact. Let's just talk about what would be different if that fact weren't true. If that weren't true, then what? And now you've eased people into thinking a little differently. And then as folks are talking about a situation, you can ask questions like, here are the facts. They are established. We've accepted these. But let's just do a quick check-in. Are any of these facts obsolete? Are there any new facts that change how we feel about or prioritize the established facts? And it's also fair to ask, are these still facts? Were they ever facts? Can we prove them? Was our source reliable? We're operating as if these were facts. Every once in a while, shouldn't we just check in to make sure that they are accepted and established and truly factual and not obsolete, and that if those facts weren't true, we'd still be doing things the same way? So these are ways to challenge facts, to be a devil's advocate, and to prompt some discussion that could be really, really healthy. This is called productive conflict, and every organization needs it every now and again. This is also a fun one. This technique is called wishful thinking. Wishful thinking liberates people, similarly to how brainstorming does, because you give people permission to indulge in something that typically in business gets dismissed as impractical. So we say to people, all right, let's just talk about the things we usually don't talk about. For a few moments here, let's just indulge. The perfect solution, the perfect scenario, if there were no barriers, if we had no resource constrictions, if nothing else was in the way, the ideal, perfect solution outcome would be, and we let people talk about it. We get all on the same page. We actually then develop a bit of a shared vision for what we wish were and what the possibilities might look like. And then we have to, having now established that perfect solution, now we have to think about what's in the way. So we're going to do brainstorming, but this time it's not going to be for solutions. It's going to be about problems. This is called blamestorming. And the question is, the ideas you're inviting are, well, let's get out on the table every single thing that is potentially in our way of not having this ideal. And you invite it to be a free-for-all. All the same rules of brainstorming apply here because you want to get all the ideas out on the table. And only later, after you've got everything out there, later, you come back to those problems and you ask, well, what would it take then? These are obstacles to our ideal. What would it take to eliminate this obstacle? How about this one? And you go through them until you can get as many of them paired out as possible so that you are now closer to whatever first looked like merely wishful thinking. Suddenly it's more possible. All right, those are half of our creative approaches to problem solving. Let's do the other 5. Don't forget, I really do welcome your questions during the presentation. Sometimes people tell me, I don't have time to post my question because I'm taking notes. So we'll certainly allow for time at the end. But if you've got a question, if you've got time to post it, don't hesitate. Don't hold them all until the end. All right, number 6 out of our 10. is also a way of liberating people and the way that they're thinking about their problem. This is called escapism. And you can tee this up, you can get the ball rolling. Don't be afraid that it's funny or ridiculous or impractical or not businesslike. That's the point. We're trying to get away from all those norms. So you're going to start off in this particular approach by proposing the most outrageous, ridiculous thing that you can think of as a solution. And we're going to let people know that what's legal, what's polite, what's normal, all those things do not matter. And not only that, but we're not even going to be realistic. We're going to deny gravity and all the other physical laws. We're just going to get rid of every limitation. And as people start then going with you to talk about that most outrageous thing that you could think of, then you're going to capture their ideas, and there is going to be something in there that's more practical than it first seemed. There's going to be something in there that you can extrapolate from and find real solutions, things that you actually can apply. Some of these ideas are going to be somewhat feasible. And because they're somewhat feasible, you now have a building block to work back toward the solution that you need, a different one than you would have thought of otherwise. You've probably heard of this one, maybe not by this term, but Einstein really believed it was important to be able to visualize a problem. So what you do with Einstein's method is you tell people to think about the problem. We're all thinking about the same problem, and as you're thinking about that problem, draw a picture of it. I encourage people to go free form. This is not about getting a literal picture. Their ability to be artistic and to draw an exact sketch of something is not what we're after here. We're just getting a figurative representation of the problem. Your subconscious is going to get involved here because it's in all of these methods the subconscious that we're trying to liberate. And usually your subconscious is trying to tell you something. So Elias Howe, he used this method. He had a picture that when he was thinking about a problem, the picture he drew was about cannibals attacking him. Seems really random, but their spears, they had holes at the top. And that is how Elias Howe solved the problem that led to the invention of the sewing machine. He was using this method. Similarly, Einstein had a famous picture. You might have seen it. It's called Train Ride on a Beam of Light. And for him, that brought together, it codified his theory of relativity and shaped all of modern physics. So go ahead, draw these pictures, visualize something that is triggered in your subconscious by the problem. Then take a second step, try to visualize a solution, add to your picture, and then come back later and review your work and see if there's anything there that you can bring out of that work that might help you solve the problem. Here's another one from the critical thinking approach. And I gave you a link, by the way, to a video series. If critical thinking is something you want to build on, you've got a link in the attachments to the playlist that'll take you there. This is the Socratic Method. It's been taught for over 2,200 years. And this method is based on a belief that all knowledge and all understanding are already within each of us and just need to be drawn out. This is when I say we're liberating something inside of us, this is what we're hearkening back to. In fact, the word education, it has its roots in the word educare, which means to draw forth. Walt Whitman was a student of this philosophy. He said, if you observe anything, even a blade of grass, very closely, then you will discover the universe. So you might not be likely to get that far with this method, but you will be surprised, I think, by how effective thinking out loud can be. So with the Socratic method, you describe the problem out loud and in detail to anybody, any listener. Use it with your dog. It's not important that they understand what you're describing, But as you're giving details about the problem and your perceptions of it, you're going to be making some little discoveries. So don't worry about thinking. Your words don't have to be perfect. Just talk. And if you have no listener, or if you're afraid you won't remember something, use a tape recorder. Just talk. And what you're going to discover through this process are your own biases, your own perceptions. You're articulating those, and as you do, you're going to be looking at them from the other side. And pretty soon you'll be debating with yourself and asking some questions, as Socrates did. There's the Socratic Method. And as you're asking those questions and doing deeper level discovery, you're going to find within yourself a lot of the answers that were masked or unavailable to you before. Okay, mind mapping, one that you might have heard of, maybe done. It is very effective. It chases an idea through all sorts of connections. It helps you to take better shape of the idea. It can be used to reframe a problem or an idea and to give you clarity regarding potential solutions. So a few years back, my dad had been experiencing increasing levels of dementia, and we needed to move him to a care facility. And it was going to be a massive undertaking. He had this house. He had so much stuff. He had a lifetime in this house, and it was just overwhelming to think about, how do we get rid of the stuff, and how do we find him a new place, and how do we get him to accept these ideas, and how do we get him to give up the things that he's surrounded with. It was completely overwhelming. And so we had to break it down. We had to think about it in pieces, not just about everything all at once, but to break it down. So there's the stuff piece and there's the cost piece. Well, how do we break those down? Well, the cost, we can divest some things to help pay for this. The stuff, well, do we have to sell the house? Can we maintain? Could we have an estate sale? And from there, we broke those down even further and further until we got to a place where there were manageable pieces that we could build toward instead of trying to do it all at once. We just couldn't. It was overwhelming. And similarly, you can do that with narrowing. With narrowing, you are going to be able to take that original problem and break it down so that it's not as overwhelming as it was before. You're going to be looking at it in a way that you make it into segments. I recommend the shape of a funnel because that just helps you to think from big to small. And divide it into at least 5 segments. Write down the whole problem at the top, then write a piece of the problem. The whole problem is not going to go away. You can come back to it just like you did with mind mapping a little later. But for now, the whole problem, and then a smaller piece of the problem, not all the pieces, just one piece. And then break that down. Ask some questions to narrow it down. Get smaller and smaller. And then only solve the problem at the bottom of the funnel. We did this with my dad too. Right? How are we going to get rid of his stuff? And how are we going to be able to handle everything? The problem at the top was so big, it was the whole thing. So then it got to the second level, get rid of some stuff. Does he have to sell it before he moves? It was a great question. No, move him first and then move his stuff. And we found that the real problem, the most important problem, was none of that was going to happen as long as he lived there. So we needed to separate Dad from his stuff. Sadly, that was the only way he was going to be able to cope and we were going to get anything done. We couldn't help him, and he needed care. So that became, we had that clarity then about that being the bigger and more present problem. All right, I think I've answered the couple of questions that were posted. Keep them coming. I'll leave you with this quote from Albert Einstein. It's a good one because what we have been indulging here is in the realm of imagination rather than practical. In business, we do make the mistake sometimes of overemphasizing only the practical, and we forget that there's more. There's more to everything in life than only what's immediate, tangible, and practical. I encourage you to visit my website. I always enjoy talking to folks after these presentations and answering your questions directly and being able to work with you. So I would encourage you to take advantage of my offer to visit the website and to come talk with me. So as I am wrapping up here and waiting for any additional questions, let me just say that I enjoy those conversations. I enjoy it when we get together on LinkedIn. I encourage you to take the attachments. There are some offerings there, some tools there that are just yours to use as you see fit. And I encourage you to sign up for our next session in July. We'll be continuing in the series of personal effectiveness. Certainly, you can go back and view any of the previous presentations on demand. I'm Deb. My company is People First Productivity Solutions. We build organizational strength by putting people first. And that's why we talk about personal effectiveness. Every person deserves the opportunity to learn how they can be more effective in the work that they do and in the interactions they have with others.